Hi, I'm Selena from Annie's Bookstop of Worcester, and I'm here with Wendy O'Leary. And Wendy is an author, she's an educator, and she's a public speaker. And she is a mindfulness educator. And she has also written her latest book is called The Monster Parade. And she is going to talk to you a little bit about the Monster Parade, and I hope she'll show you a couple of pictures from it. So go ahead, Wendy.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you for inviting me to join you today. So yeah, The Monster Parade is my most recent book, and I'm happy to show a couple pictures. But just to say, The Monster Parade is really a book about how our emotions can be seen as like monsters going by in a parade. And so it's a book that can be really supportive and helpful in talking to children about dealing with their big feelings. And for that matter, and talking to adults about dealing with their big feelings, right? We have them too. But the Monster Parade uses that analogy throughout, and it's an opportunity for children to kind of get to know their feelings a little bit better and then cultivate some skills to deal with them. So here's the cover. And I
Very
really love the illustrator, just a shout out, Noemi Giannette Landry did such a phenomenal job. I used this story in teaching before it was a book. So I would just read it from a piece of paper. And to see it come to life with the illustrations was just so powerful. So they did these sort of child friendly images. And then this is one of my favorite spreads. So this, I'll show you theirs first.
much.
And so this throughout the book, practices are integrated into the book so that both the adults and the child can practice some mindfulness skills together. So in this spread, it says, breathe in and your belly fills like a balloon. Breathe out and it shrinks. You will feel calmer so soon. So we're integrating the practice so that people can, and usually when I use it in reading, when I share it with schools and children in classrooms and nonprofits, I'll stop and we'll do the practice like as we read it. So that's one of my favorite spreads. And the other, if I can find real quick, um, I really enjoy the angry monster. And we probably all felt the angry monster. So this is just a little one to remind us that like we all have these feelings that they go by, they come, they go. Lots of sort of ideas about mindfulness that are integrated into the story. And it's also all in verse. So that it's kind of catchy for children, easy to remember some of the tools and skills.
Oh, that's great. So, what can what do you think draws readers to these kinds of books?
Yeah. So I think the readers who are drawn to these books are drawn often. And in fact, I wrote this book with myself as a young parent in mind. You know, when I was a parent, what were the books I was looking for? And in particular, ways to support my children. So I think the adults who are drawn to these books for their
Mhm.
children are drawn to them as teaching tools, right? They want to have an open door to conversations about how to deal with feelings. And so I think adults, parents, teachers, caregivers are drawn in that way. For the children, though, particularly the Monster Parade, I really wanted it to be playful and fun, not like now we're going to talk about emotions, right? I wanted it to have this sort of playful, interested curiosity because we want children to be curious and interested about their inner world. And we don't want it to seem like a chore, another thing to do. So I loved that her pictures were so bright and colorful and vibrant and wanted to draw children in that way. So I think children are drawn to it because let's face it, for kids, monsters are fun, right? So it's a great analogy and it's a really playful, fun analogy for children. Just to say, so my first book, which you can see over that corner, is Breathing Makes It Better, that I co-wrote with Christopher Willard. And that book is more like a sort of soothing, calming practice also integrated into it, but also a mindfulness book. And this one was intentionally more playful and fun. So a little bit of a different feel. Still skills and tools around mindfulness and around emotional resiliency, I would even say, and with a little bit different twist to them.
So do you have different types of monsters for the different types of emotions?
Yeah. So it's really funny in my family. There's like everybody's vote. This is my favorite monster. This is everybody's picked their favorite. And so within the book, there are different monsters. You know, there's one that's traditionally kind of the one that she uses for sad, and yet there is some weaving in and out. And I think the important thing here is. Yes, the children can identify like that angry monster is the angry monster throughout. There's a worry, there's a sad, and yet what's really important, what I want children to start to do, right? They can use the book as a jumping off point, but then some of the practices, and there are at the back of the book, there are practices and activities. So there's a whole section on, what are some other exercises and activities that you can try with children. And in that part, I want children to start to picture what does their angry monster look like, right? This might be what Noemi's looks like, but what does yours look like? How does it feel? What would it be like? What kind of energy does it have? What would it be like if you reached out to touch that monster? What would that be like for you? Does it want you to touch it or does it want you to stay away? So we want to sort of encourage children to start envisioning, and I actually just posted on my Facebook today some children from the Boys and Girls Club of Worcester who were using the book, and they did pictures of their own monsters and held them up. Super cute. That's what we want. We want the children to start to internalize and start to get to know their own monsters.
Do you ever have them draw their own monsters?
So
Or
when I teach, I'll do like that's one of the activities. So we might do drawing there. Yeah, I have, and that's the wonderful thing about this analogy. There's so many creative activities, and I do lots of workshops and trainings. This is my, really, I wrote the book as another teaching tool. I'm a teacher first and foremost, and I teach skills for emotional well-being, for emotional resilience. So when I go out and do trainings or professional development, I'll share a whole bunch of different activities, monster related. Like right beside me, I have paperback here. I'll keep monsters, right? Like everything, it's all monsters all the time in this house lately. So we have all these different kinds of activities. You can do a rock and draw monsters, right? And then you can hold the rock while you do your breathing activities. So there's lots of monster related activities, drawing pictures of their monsters, talking about how it feels in their body when that monster visits. And the message in the book really is the monsters, they come and they go, not to get pulled into the parade. They're not in charge, right? You're not the monster. They're not in charge. How can you sort of stay on that sidewalk and watch it go by without getting pulled into the parade?
Oh, that sounds wonderful. So the inspiration for this book was really just what was the real inspiration for this book?
So I actually wrote this book probably over 10 years ago. And I think I mentioned I was using it in teaching. And there were a couple different things that kind of came together to inspire the writing of this book. I used to actually do a parade game with my children when they were little. And we parade, I could picture us on snow days. I'd be like, okay, parade around like you're a king or a queen. How does that feel in your body? Parade around like somebody just hurt your feelings. How does that feel? So we would do this kind of parade of feelings. And it was just a game that I came up with and something that we would do for fun. And then when I started years later teaching mindfulness in schools, and I wanted an activity, I was working in a kindergarten in a gymnasium with like 30 kindergartners. And I was like, I need something like fun and engaging. I'm like, oh, I'll do a parade of feelings. And so we literally did a parade. I had the children marching around. When I'd ring a bell, they'd take a breath, and then we parade around like somebody who feels angry. And it wasn't, the monsters really came in as I started to picture what a book would look like. What would a picture look like? And then it took that whole turn with the monsters. But this idea of the parade of emotions sort of came out of my teaching. And I was sitting in a coffee shop actually, and I was designing this class for these kindergartners. And for whatever reason, like just suddenly the idea of like, I could picture them as monsters going by. I'm like, oh, this would be a really cute book. And there really aren't books. That would be so helpful in my teaching, to have a book and a great way to share the teachings. And so like a verse came to me. And from there, I just kind of built on it. And the idea sort of blossomed from there.
Ah, okay. So, what kind of research went into writing this book?
So, for all my books, the research is really based on mindfulness, right? Because all of my books are about mindfulness and emotional regulation. So, I am a certified meditation teacher and also a certified yoga teacher. And I have extensive training in like trauma informed mindfulness and in mindfulness for children, yoga for children. So, really, all of my research is my training. And so it's really just sort of really bolstering my skills. So that's the biggest piece, although there is one more aspect of, and you could call it research. I would call it research, but that goes into the training for this. And that goes into sort of designing a book like this and also into any of my teaching. And that is my own practice. So anything I teach, I work with. I work with monsters in my own parade all the time. Like I use the practice. So any kind of book I'm going to write, and every book I have written, I have a third one coming out next year, are all based first and foremost in my own practice and in my own education around mindfulness practices, both for adults and for children.
Okay. So, what was the biggest challenge in writing and putting out this book?
That's a good question. So it did take a long time to get it out there. So the publishing process I found really challenging,
Mhm.
just in general, and sort of getting that initial access point. However, I would say the biggest challenge really for me in getting the book out there is sort of, and what I've learned the most about really is about myself. And that is sort of digging a little deeper and looking at like my own hesitancy to put myself out there. The promotion part for me is really hard. And so I have found that to be sort of the biggest challenge is to overcome that. And the way that I've overcome that is the reminder to myself that when I'm promoting the book, I'm promoting and encouraging a way for people to help children. And that's really what my, so as long as I can stay clear to my intention, which is to be of benefit to children and their families, and to those who care for them, then I feel like I've learned how to kind of work with that. That said, social media is definitely not my strength.
Okay. So, what else can we expect from you in the near future?
So, I'm very excited about like lots of trainings and workshops and sort of building off of this Monster Parade book in terms of my work and my teachings. From a writing perspective, I do have some articles that are coming out, blogs in the Mindful magazine does a blog, mindful.org. So I've had a few in there, and I'm really excited about one coming out about this practice for adults. How do we as adults kind of work with the monsters? And I actually have a practice up on my YouTube channel that includes working with this practice. I also recently contracted for my third book, and that is going to be, and I just saw the cover, a draft of the cover for that book. So I'm so excited, again, seeing it come to life. And that book is on self-compassion for children. And
Wonderful.
yeah, self-compassion is like an integral part of mindfulness. It's part and parcel of a mindfulness practice, and yet sometimes it's helpful to kind of explicitly pull it out and highlight it, and that's what this book does. It's based on the work of actually Chris Germer and Kristen Neff, who did the Mindful Self-Compassion program and have done lots of research, and I'm trying to sort of tailor some of what they taught and the research around emotional resilience for children. How do we share these tools with children? So I'm very excited that will be coming out in 2023.
Wonderful. That sounds great. So, I have some questions for you about being a writer. What's your favorite part about being a writer on the whole writing and publishing process?
So definitely not the publishing process, the writing process. I think it's like that idea, like when you have that like first, for me, like I'll be doing something and suddenly I'll be like, oh. that would be a great idea. This is something like that sense of this is something I want to share. And so I really get excited about that creativity that comes with that. And when I'm not under a deadline, just to sort of play around with it. And I try and really use that terminology with my own writing, to have a really gentle, playful approach to my own writing.
Okay. And what's been your favorite adventure during your writing career?
Venture. Trying to think. I don't
It's
know
a
if
very
I've had,
broad
yeah, like
question.
adventure. Interesting word. I like that. So I think for me, it really has been sometimes, you go into like a school. So I do a lot of readings in school as part of my teaching. And the sort of some of the things that children will say, and I thrive on that part. And so for me, I don't know if I would call it an adventure, but it's really when I can be, because I do a lot of adult work. I'll train adults to work with children. But for me, the best part is when I can be right on the floor there with the kids and reading the book and listening to some of their questions and their comments. And so one time when I read Breathing Makes It Better, because I haven't been able to go into schools yet with the Monster Parade, but I'm looking at doing some this spring as
Oh,
restrictions loosen up. Yeah, so I'm very excited about that. But with Breathing Makes It Better, I had a child who once afterwards came up to me and told me that, Mrs. O'Leary, you're a very good reader. And I was like, it was just so adorable. And, she said, I'm going to practice reading just like you. And so I always encourage children like about around their reading and their writing to sort of, play with that. And if it's something you enjoy. And I said, that's so exciting, and to hear them share just little stories about how they taught their parents. My mother's alarm system was going off when the juice spilled everywhere. And I told her to stop, because in Breathing Makes It Better, it says stop and take a breath. And she said, so I said to her, stop and
excuse me.
take a breath. And so I love, hearing like the little ways that they're starting to learn and share some of the practices.
Oh,
So I don't know if
that's
it's an
great.
adventure, but for me, that's the part
That's
that's
an
heartwarming.
adventure. Absolutely, that's an adventure. Yeah. So, what is the greatest lesson that you've learned thus far in your writing career?
Yeah, I think I would circle back to that, what I've learned about myself, and probably um, it's about vulnerability, right? When you write something, you're putting yourself out there. And Breathing Makes It Better was co-authored with Chris Willard. This is my first book on my own. And so that's an added level of vulnerability. And so it's that getting comfortable with kind of putting myself out there and with feeling okay saying, here's my book, check it out, and promoting it in that way and getting a comfort level with that has really been and continues to be something that I'm learning about and paying attention to.
Ah, so what piece of advice would you give to other writers?
Yeah, so I think I would say to stay clear on what your intention is. Like, I think to be able to write and know why you're writing. What's the purpose? What are you writing about? Who are you writing for? To really like kind of revisit that. I know I periodically will revisit that when I'm working on something. I might have the children's portion, but then at the back matter, who am I writing that for? Is that the adult? How is that perceived? What's my intention? And sometimes, like, not getting too caught up in all the flurry and the trying to get it out there and all that, and to really stay clear that my intention for me, bottom line, my intention to benefit children and those who care for them. And so as long as I remind myself of that, then feeling stuck, if I'm writing and I can't quite, I'm feeling a little stuck, I don't put as much pride. I'm like, you know what? You're just doing this to be of benefit to children. lean back a little bit, take a breath, and it allows me to kind of move forward. And I think that staying clear on your intention is a really important piece. And your intention might be that you're writing for the love of writing, right?
Mhm.
As opposed to writing to put it out there. So it's really, I think, useful. I don't get caught up in like being an author. As a matter of fact, I always say I'm a teacher who wrote a book, or who wrote now 2 books, 3 to come. So, I don't, that part about being an author, I kind of lean back on that a little bit. I'm like, you know what? Stay clear on my intention. I happen to write. I love to write. I love the creativity of sharing practices in interesting ways that'll engage children and families. So staying clear on why you're doing what you're doing, I think, is really important.
Okay. Are there any groups or clubs or organizations that you might recommend to others that have helped you in your career?
Yeah, so less in my writing, like really, for the writing piece, I do have friends who are authors, and they were tremendously helpful and supportive. And so that was really useful for me, but I really didn't get involved in any clubs or groups. That said, lots of groups and organizations that I'm affiliated with that are connected to my work, my content. So the mindfulness piece and also children's development, right? Like, so if I'm going to write a book for children, I need to understand children's development to know what's appropriate and what isn't appropriate. So lots of being involved in organizations around early education and care and child development. Those are the things that I've done, but more geared towards content and
Mhm.
less towards the writing piece.
Okay. Now I have some questions about you as a person. Okay.
Okay.
What is one thing that most people don't realize about you?
Hmm. So I think when people, particularly people who know me because they know that I teach meditation and mindfulness, I think a lot of them expect that I'm going to be like mellow and super calm. And yet, you can find me actually tonight at a dancing class, or in my house frequently with my music cranked up, dancing. And like that's my 5 minute. That is one of the things I do when I'm stuck in writing. Put on my music, get up, dance around, sing at the top of my lungs. So I do have more of an exuberant, which I think works with my work with children, but I'm a little bit more exuberant. So I think that's something people don't know about me. And then just a little funny thing that most people don't know, and that is that my name was almost Pebbles. My sister was supposed to name me. So I'd like to say that because then I feel like people are, oh, Pebbles, right? How many people do you know? But my mother told my sister she could name me and she wanted to name me Pebbles. But my other sister convinced her Wendy. And so I was actually named after Wendy from Peter Pan. That's how she convinced her. But yeah, so a little serious one, a little funny story. Yeah.
If you were a boy, you would have been Bam Bam, right?
And then we joked around. I had a neighbor who lived next door who was a boy, and they were like, and he's Bam Bam, and you would have been Pebbles.
That's great. Okay. So what is or are your passions when you're not writing, your hobbies, things like that?
Hmm. So, not so much hobbies, but my passions are really, my priorities are
Hmm.
my family and my friends, like making sure I have time, quality time, with my family and with my friends. And I also really love nature, being out in nature, as you know.
Yes, I do.
Paths crossed before. So I love, we live on a lake. I enjoy kayaking and hiking and wildlife. I love to travel when I'm able to do that. S- Probably those, and dancing. I mentioned dancing before. Dancing. I love to sing. I just don't do it well. Um, but I love dancing and singing as well. So I try and fit in some physical kinds of things. And then, of course, one of the things I do when I'm not writing and not teaching is I do have a very consistent meditation practice, and I enjoy participating in programs that are focused on mindfulness and meditation as well.
Yoga, I would assume,
Yoga,
right?
yes, yoga, yes.
Yeah.
I like to do a lot of things apparently.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Okay, next question. What does your writing space look like? And
Ah,
what kinds of things do you need to have with you? Like, do you have to have a certain type of drink or a food?
so I think I mentioned, right, I started the Monster Parade in a coffee shop. So I'm not super particular about where I need to write. Um, that said, by and large, I write in my kitchen at the kitchen table. We have a, sort of a very open floor plan house. I am right now in my office, but it's kind of it's small and a little closed in, and it's downstairs. So I like to be upstairs. The kitchen overlooks the water. So I have that. I can see the birds coming to my bird feeder, and I enjoy sort of that more open, spacious feel when I have the house to myself. And as far as what I need, so I might have a cup of tea with me when I'm writing, um, or I might have I might have a little something to munch on, but usually that I'll take a break, like when I'm starting to feel stuck, and I might go and have a little something to munch on, or have the cup of tea often during my break. So I usually just sort of sit at the table, and I don't really need a lot, though I do appreciate quiet. It does need to be
Mhm.
when I have the house to myself, that I'm able to do that.
Oh, you answered my next question. Do you like music or quiet when you're writing? So great, you like quiet. Um, and writers often have furry or feathered or otherwise non-human companions that to help them or uh, hinder them with their work. And do you have any of those? And do they help or hinder you?
That's a great question. So just to go back to that quiet thing. So I do really like quiet. And the other piece that I would just add to that is, and in part, I like quiet because I don't want anyone around because I do talk to myself sometimes when I'm writing. I'll say it out loud. I do the same when I'm planning a class. Like I'll kind of talk it out. I process through talking. And I think, again, as sort of advice to writers, knowing how you process things is really helpful. And I found that once I could accept that I needed to talk it out, it's really helped my writing process quite a bit. As far as furry or feathered friends, so we had a dog and a cat, and lost both of them. Probably the dog a little under 2 years ago, the cat a little over 3 years ago. Um, and they were adorably pesky, both of them. And so probably hindered, but gave me a good little breather. The cat, especially because, yes, I sit at my table when I write, but, upon occasion, I'll sit on my couch and I'll have an idea and I'll start plunking away. And the cat would climb over the keyboard, as many cats. I'm sure anybody with cats can appreciate this. And
Mhm.
the dog really loved my attention, and we were home alone a lot together. So the dog, often, if I got really engrossed in something, occasionally I get those like nudges at my leg, like, pat me, you're not paying attention. But they were also, so I say hindrance, but they were also great. It's good sometimes to have that like little break and that diversion, because sometimes the mind can get so contracted when you're trying hard to write. And they were great reminders to loosen up a little bit.
That's a good point. Yeah. And so I have two more questions for you. Where can people find your work aside from Annie's Bookstop of Worcester? And this is where I make a plug for Annie's on every video. If you want to buy any of either of Wendy's books or both of them, you can get it at Annie's, and you can send email to orders@anniesbooksworcester.com, or you can call us at 508-796-5613. And that's Annie's. And where else could people buy your books?
So you can get my books pretty much at any at any store, and you can also of course get them online. So whatever online format, if you go on Amazon or if you do Bookshop, often benefits, and I don't exactly know how it works, but I know independent bookstores can benefit from purchases over Bookshop. And also, if people are interested in just sort of finding out more about my work, that's my books. But if you want to find out more about my work, you can certainly check out my website. And that is www.wendyoleary, no apostrophe, .com. And you can find out a little bit more about the work that I do there. You can also find me on Facebook and on Instagram.
And that was my last question.
Sorry.
How can, how can we find your work and share your awesomeness? And that was it.
Thank you so much. Yeah. So, people also, I always say, I respond to every email I get. I do this work because I'm passionate about supporting families and children. So if people want to know more about the book, there's actually a educator's companion guide for both books that are available free of charge on my publisher's website, Shambhala. And also, I'm happy to share those links. So people can also reach out to me by email. Always I respond. So that's woleary25@gmail.com. And people are always welcome to reach out to me if they want more information.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Wendy. And maybe when COVID is completely gone or whatever, we'll start having signings again, and we'll see you at the store.
That would be lovely.
Well, thanks so much for joining us, and good luck with your book.
Thank you so much, Selena. It was good to see you.
Good to see you too.